In this module, we will work together on installing e-commerce components. Let's take a look at what we will learn. Installing e-commerce components. First, we will prepare system for e-commerce store setup. Then we will configure retail channel database and configure settings. Later, we will configure the online store, and then we will end up with verifying the store deployment whether it is successful or not. Let's start with an overview of the process in the first lesson. Let's take a high-level view of the process of installing e-commerce components. If you look at this slide, so there are four important components with respect to installing e-commerce components. So the first thing would be pre-installation tasks. Next would be deploying retail online channel and configuring the settings. Then executing a set of PowerShell scripts, and then verify whether the store is successfully deployed or not. Now let's start by digging into the pre-installation task in the next lesson. Pre-installation tasks. This is where we will be mostly discussing about the system requirements, mainly in terms of what is the specification of hardware which is necessary for setting up an online store. So the main expectations would be a minimal of 4 processor and 10 gigabytes of RAM, and a recommended configuration would be a 16 gigabyte of RAM. And we have to also make sure that we have the URL rewrite module 2.0 of a 64-bit installation there on the SharePoint server, and we should also verify that the server is not a domain controller. The deployment will fail if the server is a domain controller. However, for development environment, we can have domain controller, SQL, server database, SharePoint and AX in one single box. So the mandatory installations would be Microsoft SharePoint Server 2013 Enterprise Edition, then installation of Microsoft SharePoint Server 2013 Service Pack 1. This needs to be verified as current Service Pack 1, and you can download it from MSDN. And moving on, we should also have Microsoft Dynamics AX R3 2012 to be installed, and also the retail module for Microsoft Dynamics AX needs to be installed. And other than this, we should also have SharePoint settings and domain accounts configured for setting up an online store. Deploying the online store requires you to configure settings in SharePoint. You must also enter server names and domain service accounts in the online store XML file, which I will be showing it in a later point of time in this lesson. To avoid permissions and issues and streamline the development process, we must do a few following steps, wherein we need to verify that all SharePoint application pools are running in IIS Manager. We have the SharePoint Central Administration running. So let me get into the VM and show you what are the services which are required to be running in SharePoint. So out here, I am in SharePoint Central Administration, and under Application Management, you need to click on Manage Service Applications, and out here you will find the set of services. However, for us the concentration would be on SharePoint Search Service and Manage Metadata Service. These are two set of services which we need to mandatorily have, and other than that, you may also need the timer job service and the timer job processes running in the services.msc. So make sure all these things are ready before you start the installation of online storefront. If you did not install and configure Microsoft Dynamics AX, verify that you are a member of the system administrator role in Microsoft Dynamics AX. If you did not install and configure SharePoint, verify that you are a member of the farm administrator role in SharePoint and that you have administrator access to each site collection in the farm. If you did not install and configure Microsoft SQL Server, Microsoft Dynamics AX or SharePoint, verify that you are a member of the sysadmin role on the database server for all Dynamics AX databases and also all SharePoint databases. Domain accounts. The deployment process requires domain user accounts for 3 set of user roles. So one would be a retail job user. This account was specified when you installed SharePoint. It is the account under which the SharePoint timer service runs. Product catalog web app pool user. So this would be the second user account. This account will be specified in the deployment XML file, which will be covered in the later topic of discussions in the upcoming lessons. So the third user account would be storefront web app pool user account. This account was specified when you installed SharePoint. It is the account under which the security token service application pool runs in IIS Manager for the site collections. So verify or create a domain account for each of these users. You will enter these accounts in the deployment XML file later. So next, let's talk about prerequisite validation. So when we do the prerequisite of validations when we are installing Dynamics AX for retail online store, you will find set of installers which will be missing. So what you need to go ahead and do is, you need to go ahead and download those particular links from the installation wizard. You will have a link for it associated to each and every missing installers. Go ahead and click on it, get to the URL, download that particular prerequisite and go ahead and install it into your system. So once this happens, the prerequisite validation gets successful. Then we can further go ahead and install the online store. Moving on, let's discuss about configuring servers to receive remote commands. So this is something essential in a farm environment, wherein in a server farm you may need to do remoting for PowerShell command running over different servers in the farm. So for that you have to make sure that you enable the PS remoting by forcing the PowerShell command line on each server, and especially on the web front-end server in the farm. So this command configures the computer to receive Windows PowerShell remote commands that are sent by using the WS management technology. On Windows Server 2012, Windows PowerShell remoting is enabled by default. You can use enable-ps remoting to enable Windows PowerShell remoting on other supported versions of Windows, and re-enable remoting on Windows Server if it becomes disabled. Now moving on, I will be talking through in the next lessons about deploying the retail online channel and configuring settings. This lesson describes how to use Microsoft Dynamics AX setup to install online channel on the SharePoint server and how to configure settings for retail online channel. This includes components that are needed to provision an online sales channel on the SharePoint server. This component lets you integrate data from Microsoft Dynamics AX into the SharePoint site. You can also administer the online channel by using the Microsoft Dynamics AX client. After you install the Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012 retail online channel by using Dynamics AX setup, there are several settings that we must edit in the settings XML file and also a topology XML file. We will go ahead and look in depth about the entire installation process in the VM. So let's have a look at the VM now. So out here, if you see, I have opened the installer of Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012 R3, and I'm going to click on install Microsoft Dynamics AX components, and so once I click on it, so you should be finding a wizard popping up, and in this wizard I'm going to click on next, and I'm going to say add or modify components because this particular VM is already completely installed with end-to-end of eCommerce. So out here, let me click on add or modify components to have a closer look. So this is more about adding additional components to the Microsoft Dynamics AX product in this particular server farm. So this particular VM is a single server box which has SharePoint, Dynamics AX CRT async server, CRT async client, everything is installed in one single box. However, in a farm environment you may have it isolated in different servers. Now moving on, I am going to click on next, and once I click on next, so you will be finding the list of components which are already installed in Dynamics AX. Let me give you a closer look of what are the required stuffs which needs to be installed. So the main important thing would be you need to have integration components like .NET Business Connector, web services on IIS, and of course client and AOS server to be installed. And if I further scroll down, so these are the retail components which are already installed in this machine. For our area of interest, which is on e-commerce, we need the commerce data exchange real-time service, async server, async client, and retail channel SDK, which is in short called retail SDK. And also we need to have the retail channel database installed for this particular e-commerce setup. So let me zoom out, and so the first step that we will be doing for this setting up of online store would be, on a fresh environment we will be installing retail channel database as the first starting point. So you must only select retail channel database and hit next, and on click of next you should be finding a set of prerequisites which are expected. So this was something which we discussed in the previous lesson. If suppose any of the prerequisite is not installed in this machine, you should be finding an error symbol here, and you might be finding a download link here. So on click of the link you should be able to reach to the respective installation link from the MSDN, and you can download it and go ahead and install it in your machine, and then again you can revalidate this particular prerequisite validation and then move on to the next place. So if I click on next, if you see here, I would be giving the server name and a database name. So out here I am not going to do it, but however when you are trying to do a setup, you may need to give a new database instance name with configuring to your server. Now coming back, I am going to cancel this wizard. So after clicking on retail channel database, you may be having a requirement of moving towards the next steps on installing retail online store. So out here with R3, AX 2012 R3, you have a provision of setting up a full online retail store through running a wizard, which was not the case with R2, but however in R3 we have a wizard through which you can complete the entire process. So if you see here, I am getting back again to the installation wizard. I am clicking on add or modify components. On click of next, I should be finding all the components coming back. So here the important thing which we need to select would be retail online channel. So on click of retail online channel, you here I have already installed it. However, in your case, when you click on next, you should be finding a list of configurations that you can configure and complete the wizard for a single server setup. But however, this is not going to be a practical scenario on a farm environment in a production setup. So what you may need to do is, on select of retail online channel, you move on to click next, do the prerequisite validation, and after that don't give any of the configuration details, rather you can say configuration can be done later. So you have a checkbox for it. So do the checkbox and make sure that you are setting up that I will be doing the configuration later after completing the installation of retail online channel. So once you do that and complete it, what you will be finding is you can go to C drive on your computer wherein you have installed the retail online channel, and get into program files, and over here you can have to go to Microsoft Dynamics AX. I came into the wrong folder, I am switching back. So click on Microsoft Dynamics AX, and here you will find a folder called common. wherein you will find all the set of DLLs. However, our expectation is to get into the folder 60. So in this particular folder you can find the retail online channel getting installed. So this is the area of focus for us for this entire e-commerce store setup. So under this you can find a folder named storefront, and under storefront you will find 4 different folders, wherein SP is the folder where the entire set of package which needs to be installed as a site collection in SharePoint through a set of PowerShell scripts, which we will be discussing in the next lesson. So here you have to make sure, one of the important thing, that if you are installing it in a Windows Server 2012, you have to make sure by opening this manifest file and remove one of the main component, which is web.administration. However, here since it's already configured, it's already been removed. So moving on, I am coming out of retail online channel folder, and if you see here, there is a folder called tools. So under this folder is the entire set of PowerShell scripts which we will be running throughout in the next section of the lesson. But however, with this particular lesson I would like to brief you about the OOB-settings and the OOB-topology files. So these are 2 important XML files which are required to be edited to set up an online store. So if you see here, first I have opened OOB-settings in a notepad, and you have set of values which you need to fill in, wherein each and every setting is very important based on the requirements you have for your installation of online store. One of the main things that you need to look around is the port number for the installation. So out here, out of the box, 4002 would be the public URL, and 4004 would be the SSL HTTPS URL, and you will also have an internal URL with the SharePoint server, which would be 4003, and internal catalog URL, which would be 4001. So this 4001 would be the port wherein you will be installing the product catalog, which gets synced to the CRT database, and the data of each and every product and its description and each and every variant of attributes will come from CRT database into the product catalog. And moving on, so if you see here, you have a computer name configured. So you have to make sure in between the percentage whatever is the computer name, so you need to replace that with your computer name, which would be out here. This particular computer name is AX2012 R2A. So we may need to change each and every computer name in this particular notepad file with a value of the computer name. And then moving on, we need to configure storefront public SSL local directory. Let me zoom it out for you, by which you will have a clarity here. So storefront public SSL certificate should be set up by installing and exporting it into a local folder. So how to create a SSL for a development environment would be a question arising here. So the way to create a local self-signed certificate can be done from IIS. So the steps you can follow it by going to the resource section. You will be finding a link. You can click on that link to go and know the step of process to create a self-signed certificate. Once you create a self-signed certificate, you can right click on IIS in the self-signed certificate list and export it to a local directory. So this is a place where you will be giving the local directory's path. So in this case, it's system drive, which is nothing but C drive, and under which SharePoint _ install certificates /SSL. So this is the path. The exported file is there, and the exported certificate name would be TSS server cert.pfx. So normally a PFX file, when you are generating with a self-signed certificate, you may need to give a password while exporting. So here the password is retail and services. You can always have your own password and configure it here. Moving on, you need to also configure the storefront web app pool user. So this would be, the value would be domain/user account. So you may need to check in your IIS what would be the storefront web app pool user which you are using for the site collection, for the SharePoint server, preferably a farm account or a dedicated web app pool account would be preferable to configure for the value. And similarly you need to configure for product catalog web app pool user, and what would be the product catalog name. So each and every detail you may need to configure with domain/user account. So one more account would be STS web app pool user. This would be again domain/user account, preferably a web app pool, dedicated web app pool user account can be configured here. Moving on, we discussed about retail job user, STS web app user, and one more user, it should be there in another place. I will show it to you when I find it out in this list. So moving on, so this would be the basic settings that you will be configuring first level to set up a storefront site. However, OOB-settings is more about configurations. The next file that you may need to configure would be OOB-topology file. So if you see in this file, you have a sequence of steps wherein you have 3 databases that gets configured, and you can always say, if you already have it installed, you can set the installation mode to be false. Whichever attributes you set to false, those particular activities will not be followed by the PowerShell script, which we will be covering in the next lesson. So during this configuration, the flow of installation would be, first the database will get installed, then set of roles, user roles will get installed, and after the user roles it will follow by installing the WSP packages for the site collection. So site collection is nothing but the port numbers which I showed you in the OOB settings. So with those URLs the site collections gets created, and inside the site collection we will have set of WSP packages getting deployed, and after deployment we will be having the features getting enabled. So each and every step will be automated through a PowerShell script, which we will be covering in the next lesson. So one more important part during this OOB topology configuration would be setting up Facebook details. So with Facebook you may need to configure a app secret and the Facebook application ID. So these are 2 things which you may need to configure by going to facebook.com/developers. So the URL would be developers.facebook.com/apps. So going there you have to create an account for yourself and create an application ID and an application secret. Once you create that, you can go ahead and configure the application ID and application secret over here, and then you have to again create a thumbprint of SSL certificate. Either you can in a production environment you may need to purchase a proper SSL certificate from a third party provider, whereas in a development environment you can always create a self-signed certificate and configure the certificate's thumbprint by right clicking on the certificate that you export and go to properties, and you will find thumbprint. The entire hexadecimal values you need to copy and give it as the value over here, and also the file path where you have the Facebook to be configured. So each and every configuration is very straightforward. You need to configure it over here wherever you have the values with brackets on. So with this I conclude the details about OOB topology and OOB settings file. However, one important thing to notice would be both these files are there inside program files. So if you right click and open it in a notepad and try to edit it and save, you may find access denied error. So always open the notepad or a Visual Studio editor with administrative privileges and go ahead and edit it. So out here if you see, there are two files which are predefined and configured for this particular installation setups. So here you can find the thumbprints are configured with the pfx file, what is the password, and wherever if you see the application pool, you have a user/domain account, and if you see the computer name comes from the common configuration, so it will automatically pick the computer name for itself. So other than that, you should be also configuring what is the channel database server name, which is again here the same server. If you look at further, there is a configuration for each and every key here in this OOB-settings updated file. So this is a demo file which is given for us along with the other installations by the product team with the product. So here you can see it is fully configured for Contoso.com Contoso.com electronic store, I'm sorry. So out here further if you go down, you can find the entire Facebook application details, wherein Facebook application ID and the app secret needs to be configured, and set of directory values for self-signed certificate for a development environment. In a production environment with a third party certificate, you may need to drop it into a folder and get the thumbprint of it and map each and every attribute over here. Other than that, if I scroll up, we also have few of the additional configurations here configured in this file, which would be good to look at. So here other than the port numbers, we also have the catalog name and channel operating unit number. If you see here the value of channel operating unit number is 068. So 068 would be the operating unit number for the online store of Contoso. Similarly, we have each and every user accounts configured here with the domain/user account. In this particular machine, it's a single box, so most of the accounts are configured with Contoso/administrator. However, in a production environment, you may need to configure respective accounts as per standards. You can check out the recommendations online for respective products, especially with SharePoint on TechNet. So moving on, here you can also see form administrator alias and form administrator email. So this is the form administrator account of SharePoint server, and also you can find publishing connector service instance service. So this is where you can configure multiple URLs if you have in a farm environment. In this case, in this single box, I have only one server which is AX2012 R2A. However, in a production environment, you may have multiple publishing connector servers running in different app servers in a SharePoint environment. So you can always have the values of each and every server name inside the same value attribute with a comma to separate between each. So this is one of the important configuration that needs to be done, which would be differing for a farm environment. And further, you can go through this entire OOB-settings-updated XML file to have a configuration knowledge about how a Contoso store is configured. Similarly, you can reconfigure for your own online store, or you can always use the existing Contoso store and go ahead and customize on top of it after the configuration of a e-commerce store using these settings. So as I already showed you about OOB-topology file, so this is the updated topology file, wherein there may not be much of a difference because each and every attributes here are pulled from OOB-settings and it gets configured. The only difference between this updated file and the regular OOB topology file would be whatever specific sections you want to run through the PowerShell script, you can set that installation alone to true, and remaining you can configure it to false. So for example, if suppose you have already a database server installed, then you may need to go ahead and set the installation to false, by which it will not repeat the same steps again. And with respect to WSP packages, there is always a chance when we run the PowerShell scripts, you may find that one of the WSP package would have completely deployed and other half would not have deployed properly. So in that case, you can always set the deploy to false for the one which has successfully deployed earlier, and have only the WSP packages which have not deployed alone to set to true. So similarly, you can always set whether you want the retraction to happen or you don't want the retraction to happen. So each and every steps can be configured. So the mostly in this particular file, you will be only setting true or false for different set of attributes in order to do the process of installation. With that, we conclude about OOB-settings and OOB-topology.xml file configurations. Now we are ready to move on the next lesson, where we will execute PowerShell scripts to deploy and configure the online store. Execute PowerShell scripts to deploy and configure online store. So after you configured all the required parameters in the OOB settings.xml file and also OOB-topology.xml file, you are ready to create and configure the online store by using PowerShell scripts. The PowerShell scripts described in this section are deployed by default by Microsoft Dynamics AX setup to the following directory on the SharePoint server, which would be in C drive, program files, Microsoft Dynamics AX, folder 60 / retail online channel / tools. Anyways, let's go ahead and look into this. Let me get into the VM and show you where exactly the path is. So it is C drive, program files, Microsoft Dynamics AX, folder 60, retail online channel, tools. So this would be the folder where you will find the entire set of PowerShell scripts which are automatically getting installed with the AX retail online channel installation. However, before getting into the PowerShell script, we have to go ahead and look into few of the important aspects of these jobs. So for out of the box Contoso storefront setup, you may need to install Contoso demo data, a storefront, and also retail jobs. So these are the three folders which will be running for a online store installation. So you may have a question about what are the other folders about. So that is about for the different storefront setup, which is for Fabricam, and also common global modules is a set of solution which is also part of installation. So all these four set of folders will get installed by running the PowerShell script. So first thing to note would be each and every folder you will find a folder called WSP which is final_WSP, then packaging logs, SP, and SP_temp. So SP is the folder where you have the entire set of package which is deassembled and kept as an unzipped version, whereas if you go and see the SP_temp, this would be that folder where when you run one of the PowerShell script, which I will be discussing further, it will go ahead and unpack the file and hold it in this SP_temp, and after unpacking the file, it will go ahead and add some of the properties which we have configured in OOB-settings and OOB-topology.xml file. It takes those properties like passing the URL, the port number of the site collection, these kind of metadatas. It goes and updates into the manifest files, and then when you generate a WSP package from that particular temporary data, it goes ahead and creates a WSP package with all the metadata configured into it. So it's more of having a WSP package out of the box, unpacking it, adding the metadata which is there in the OOB settings and topology, and repackaging it, which would be the final_WSP folder. and other than that you can also find the packaging logs. So during this packaging time, if any of the errors or whatever activities that are happening, you can also view it in the PowerShell window, but that is also now configured and managed through a text log file. So now coming back to tools folder, so we will be first doing 3 set of PowerShell scripts, especially to do the entire process of installing an online store. So first would be install prerequisite and generate WSP and deploy form solutions. So these are the 3 files. However, in a later point in the next lesson, we will be also talking about unpacking WSP packages. So now let's get started with install prerequisite -sp form. So this would be the primary PowerShell script which we will be running on a first step. What this PowerShell script does is it goes ahead and installs the site collection for you and configure each and every port number with the respective site collection, and a web application gets created for the online Contresource storefront. So once this particular step completes, then we will be moving towards the next WSP package, which is generate WSP. So with generate WSP, we go ahead and generate the WSP with all the OOP-settings and topology data with the set of folder which I showed you about sp_temp. So from there it picks and it adds all the data and generates a WSP package. So after completion of this step, we will be moving on and going ahead and deploying the form solutions. In deploy form solutions, this WSP will be picked and in the sequential order whatever is configured in the topology file. So the deployment will happen into the site collection which got installed through install prerequisite sp form. So in short, to say, you have a Contresource store, you have the URL for it, first configured through install prerequisite, then a WSP package gets deployed after generation of a WSP. Now let's get started by opening a PowerShell window. First thing to notice is always run the PowerShell with run as administrator privileges, since the PowerShell files are there inside the program files of C drive. So now we have to first of all navigate ourselves to the respective folder. So what I am going to do is I am going to copy this URL and then I am going to create the directory. And hit enter. So now I have reached the respective folder path. However, before running, it's a good practice to check whether the execution policy of this particular PowerShell is configured to unrestricted or remotely assigned. So now what we have to do is first we have to check about what is the execution policy. So get execution policy would be the first thing that we will run. So however, I have configured it unrestricted. In most cases it would be restricted. If it is restricted, even though you navigate to the correct folder and try to run the PowerShell script, you may find error that access denied and you will not be able to run any of the PowerShell script in this particular machine. So now what I have done is it's already unrestricted, so I'm not going to do again, but just for the interest of you trying to get installation of PowerShell scripts, so what you may need to do is set -execution policy space unrestricted. So when you do that, it will ask whether you want to do it or not. Say yes and hit enter. Now you should be able to run the PowerShell scripts. So I'm going to clear the screen. So next I'm going to run the first PowerShell script, so which would be install prerequisite -sp form.ps1. So this would be the PowerShell script which will go ahead and help us set up the web applications in SharePoint server, both for the product catalog and also for the online store. So install prerequisite-sp form.ps1/ob-topology and further ob-settings.xml. So on hit of enter, the PowerShell script should be running smoothly, and you will find in SharePoint central administration, when you go to application management and say manage web applications, you will be finding two URLs getting created, which is with 4001 and 4002. So with those two URLs, one is a C1 application for retail storefront internal one, and one is the out of the box storefront -public one. So with 4002 you will also find a 4003, I'm sorry, it's not 4003, it is 40,003. So with this particular port number you will find a public URL and a private URL, which is a intranet URL. So two URLs gets created by itself by extending the same site collection. So the C1 application for retail storefront internal one would be the URL wherein you will have the product catalog configured, and each and every items from the CRT database gets pushed to this particular product catalog. And from this particular URL, through cross-site publishing, we will have the data retrieved through search services, and each and every product gets displayed in the 40,002 port number in the Contoso storefront. So now, after completion of the first step of running the install form solutions, so install prerequisite sp form.ps1. So the next step would be to go ahead and install generate wsp.ps1. So generate wsp would be the one which will generate the WSP package with all the setting files for the existing WSP packages which are unpacked and stored in sp_temp, which we discussed little earlier. So over there it will go ahead and pick that particular data and does a package of WSP, and it stores into the final_WSP folder, which we already saw it for each and every folder. So one would be storefront, you will find a final_WSP getting created on generation, and similarly you will find for retail job a final_WSP package, and then you will also find for Contoso demo data a final_WSP package, and the new addition which is common global modules, which will also have a final_WSP package. So all these modules of packages gets created, and this would be the activity which will be handled by generate_WSP.ps1. So again, to run this particular PowerShell script, you need to supply the ob-topology.xml and .ob-settings.xml. So on hit of enter, you will find the entire sequence of steps carried out and a generation of WSP package happens. So once the WSP package gets created, you will be able to go to final_WSP, and you can always validate whether it has created recently with the modified date and time. So after creating the WSP packages, the next step would be deploy the entire for WSP packages to the site collection which was created in SharePoint through the previous PowerShell script run. So the next step would be the next and the final step would be deploy form solutions. So with the deploy form solutions, again the way to run this PowerShell script would be run oob-topology.xml, then .oob-settings.xml. So by running this, you will be able to deploy the form solution with all these WSP packages getting installed either in a form level or in a site level. This you can always go ahead and check in the OOB topology file, which are the files which are set for with the attribute deployed equal to true. So those particular WSP packages alone will be picked from the respective folders and it will be pushed to SharePoint site collection. So once these WSP packages gets deployed, during the same PowerShell script run of deploy form solution here, you will also find all the features getting activated in SharePoint site collection. So on activation of all the features, you will find the Contoso store getting created. So if I try to log in here by getting into the 4003, because 40,003 again, so with 40,003 it is a intranet URL, and with 40,002 it is a public URL. So I am trying to go to 40,003, by which I can locally sign in with my current administrative account. If you see here, I have moved to the 40,003 port URL, which is the intranet URL of the same Contoso store. I am going to do a sign in. So on click of sign in, I should be able to log in as the administrator account into this particular Contoso store. So once we log in, we can always go ahead and verify whether the installation is successful or not. So with this, we conclude the installation of online store. So however, let's move on to the next and the final part of this process, where we will verify whether the online store deployment was successful or not. I'll see you in the next lesson. After you run the deployment scripts and complete it without errors, you are now able to verify and validate the online store and also the deployment process. Okay, let's get into my VM and have a look at how to validate and verify the entire storefront installation setup. So currently I am back to the same Contoso retail store logged in page. So once you have come to the URL and you try to log in yourself, this is one of the step of validation which we covered in the previous lesson. However, going forward, we need to also check about whether the product catalog site has also got created successfully, because that is a site from which we get the data passed to this particular site through the search services. So I have already opened, for the sake of time, I am over here in the product catalog site, and I find the site is successfully installed. And let me go on to the uncategorized list. So I am here in the sites list, and from list I have selected now uncategorized list _000. So if you see here, each and every product from CRT database which was picked from AX and placed into CRT through async server and async client, so that is pushed to the product catalog through a timer job. So if you find all the products are visible over here, then you are pretty good in terms of the entire installation process. But suppose on a first time installation, you may definitely not find all these products getting populated into this uncategorized list. So what you may need to do is, you have to go to the central administration and you should be finding a timer job running for you. So the timer job would be retail publishing job 1. So right now I am into the job definitions. How you can come to job definitions would be, you have to select monitoring, you have to, let me go back, by which you will find how to come to this particular job definitions. So if you see here, I click on monitoring in the central administration, and once I click on monitoring, under timer jobs you have review job definitions. On click of review job definitions and go towards retail publishing job, so if you see here, retail publishing job 1 is the job which is configured for Contoso, and job 2 is for Fabricam, since we have 2 out of the box storefront installed in this particular server. So however, if you go to retail publishing job 1, you can immediately run this job if suppose this job has been never ran before. So after the entire installation setup, you have the entire storefront configured into your site collections in SharePoint. Now it's time to pick the data from CRT database through this timer job, and when you click on run now, it will go ahead and pick the entire data from CRT database and push it to the retail product catalog. So once that successfully happens, you should be able to find the data. However, about troubleshooting of these particular configurations we will be looking at in the next lesson. So with this product catalog and with the welcome page of Contoso store, and from the product catalog, if you are able to find all the data getting populated into the site, then you are pretty good in terms of verifying the storefront deployment. So the only thing would be, once the product catalog gets the data, you may not immediately find it on the Contoso store. You may need to run the search crawl to crawl the search service, and once the search crawl successfully completes indexing the datas which are there in the product catalog, then you should be finding all the details of different products available in the Contoso store. With this, we complete the verification of the entire Contoso store. I will see you in the next lesson, where we will discuss about troubleshooting the deployment process. If you experience an error during the execution phase of one of the deployment PowerShell scripts, you can rerun the script after you have resolved the error. You do not have to rerun complete scripts. If you rerun deploy form solution script, the system automatically invokes deactivate only feature and retract only solution feature PowerShell script, by which the entire deployment will rerun. So to avoid this, you can always stop running the entire PowerShell scripts. So these scripts can clean up actions that are performed by the deploy form solution scripts before redeploying. So for a developer environment setup tips, on a real-time scenario, the development environments needs custom code to be built as WSP package by using Visual Studio. So let me go ahead and get into the VM and show you how you can configure for a development environment to have a custom solution of storefront setup with your Contoso retail online store. So coming into the VM, we already discussed about where we can go ahead and find the PowerShell scripts. So other than the regular PowerShell script, you also have one more PowerShell script which is about prepare from WSP. So this is an additional PowerShell script which we will be running in order to unpackage the WSP solution which is coming from Visual Studio. So when I say Visual Studio, for a developer environment or a custom storefront solution setup, you may need to have retail SDK installed from your AX installation. So during the AX installation, you have an option when you go to install new components, wherein you will be selecting retail SDK and hit next and complete the installation. You will find under my PC, under documents, you will find a folder created called retail SDK, within which you will find entire set of SDK solutions which are available for online store, POS, retail server, commerce runtime services, So you will find each and every Visual Studio solution available for you to customize. So out here, for our scenario, we need to do a online store setup with a custom installation. So this is what most of the developers would try to do with their machine. So when you try to do this, if you see straight away into the retail SDK, you have something called update assembly identities. So this is a PowerShell script which you need to run. Before running, you need to open this bldver.cs file. So let me open it in a notepad. So if you see here, the assembly version is 6.3.0.0. So this is a build which is released by product team for us. So however, for us to go ahead and have our own custom version of a solution, so we may not be working with the 6.3.0.0 version which was provided by product team. So now we will go ahead and open this PowerShell script. Let me open this. So if you see this PowerShell script, it will go ahead and update all the solutions with a strong name key, by which you will generate a new DLL with your own new version. So the old version would be 6.3.3, okay, and you have a strong name key which was associated to 6.3.0.0. However, now since it's going to be our own custom storefront deployment, wherein we can go ahead and customize the storefront solution which was given out of the box with a Contoso store. So now we will configure with a new version. So here for example, we have configured with 1.0.0.0. However, we need to have our own strong name key created and copied and pasted over here. So for that, what you may need to do is open the solutions in Visual Studio. So here we have an online channel. So online channel is the place where you will be finding the storefront solution. You can find the connector, demo data and storefront solutions. So when I click on storefront solution, you will find the entire storefront solution available for you. So you need to open this entire solution in Visual Studio, and also you need to follow a sequence of steps to create a strong name key. You can find online how to create a strong name key at MSDN. So once you create a strong name key using Visual Studio, it's actually very simple to create. You have to right click on a solution and go to properties and try to create your own strong name key. You can probably associate the strong name key with a password, and once you create the strong name key, you can copy and paste it over this particular location, by which the strong name key applies for all your code base whichever you want to extend. So I would recommend you to place the strong name key in the retail SDK folder, and then go ahead and get the encrypted value from the strong name key and update the PowerShell script with that particular key value. So there will be a key value pair which you can get it from a strong name key, and once you get it, you can go ahead and update this assembly and run this update assembly identities. When you run it, wherever 6.3.0.0 with the specified value of a key was created by product team, so that particular keys will get replaced with your own strong name key and with your own version. So now you have a totally a new set of solution with you, wherein you can go ahead and open Visual Studio with the storefront and go ahead and build it. So once you build it, you get new set of DLLs, and also you get a new set of WSP package. So now you will get a new storefront WSP package, which you can go ahead and get into C drive, program files 86, Microsoft Dynamics AX, folder 60, and out here you have a folder called online channel, retail online channel, and inside that you have a storefront. So out here you can copy the particular folder, copy the WSP package over here, and then you you can always go ahead and run the unpack.wsp file which I showed you earlier. So the unpack PowerShell script is over here under tools folder. So when you run this unpack PowerShell script, what will happen is it will go ahead and get into the storefront folder, and from here it will pick the package and it will unpack it like how it has unpacked here. So, and from the unpacked file you will again go ahead and follow the same sequence of generate-wsp.PowerShell script which we did earlier, and then package the solution with the metadata which we have in the settings, and then you can go ahead and deploy it. Once you successfully deploy it, you will find the storefront solution with your custom Visual Studio solution incorporated into the web storefront. So with this you will have a development environment set up for you, and also you can go ahead and debug and add customizations on top of it. So this would be an ideal work which you need to do in order to have a development workspace with e-commerce online storefront. So moving on, next would be checking about ULS logs. So with ULS logs of SharePoint, you can find if any errors are happening during the installation process. If anywhere you find any installation failure, you can always go ahead and run the oob-topology file with retraction equal to true, and you can retract the installation and go ahead and find if any of the DLLs that you have generated with the development environment, and go ahead and install it into the GAC, which is global assembly cache, which is nothing but the assembly folder of your Windows server for the .NET assembly. So over there you can always GAC the particular DLLs which you have generated from your solution, and then you can further go ahead and rerun the deploy farm solution PowerShell script. So this way you can find what is the error and why it is happening, and you can fix it. Suppose you complete it and you have the entire web storefront ready, and then you don't find any of the data coming up, you can always go to this particular folder which is C drive, program files, common files, Microsoft shared, web server extensions, folder 15 and logs. So this would be the place where SharePoint will store the logs by default, unless and until you reconfigure it for a different location in the central administration of SharePoint. So out here I have opened one of the log file for you to have a look. So over here you can find what exactly has happened every minute and every second in terms of any error or any messages, and you can always go ahead and enable diagnostic log viewing for your Dynamics AX Retail. So if you want to do that, you may need to go to central admin and so I'm opening the SharePoint central admin, and out here you can get into monitoring, and here you have something called configure diagnostic logging under reporting. So once you click on it, you will be able to find diagnostic logging. So here you have something called Dynamics AX Retail 1, which is for our Contoso store. By default it is configured for general logging. You can always select it and go ahead and say the critical event to report event log would be verbose. When you say verbose, each and every bit of errors or messages which are happening with the Dynamics AX Retail, it will go ahead and log into the default log folder which we already discussed under web server extensions 15 logs under program files. So this is where you will be able to find the diagnostic logging. So with this you can always identify whether a timer job is not working, or you are not getting the data, or whether the search crawl is not working, by which you can end to end find whether the online storefront is smoothly running or not. So with this we complete the troubleshooting steps, but there are some set of error messages which we will look at further. Before going into that, I will talk about few of the errors. If you experience an error in command prompt window after you execute a script, it means that you did not add oob-topology.xml or oob settings file to the end of the script. Each script must be executed in the following form: always a PowerShell script whichever you want to run, followed by oob-topology.xml and followed by oob-settings.xml. Next, let's look at different kind of errors that you may face. So 500 internal error. If you face that error, which means you are experiencing this error due to execution of the deploy form solution script. It means that you have not installed URL rewrite module 2.0 on the SharePoint server. So once you install URL rewrite module and then execute the same deploy form solution script, you should find this error getting resolved. Further, let's look at the next error that you may come across, which is system.service-model.service activation exception. If you see this error in the command prompt window after you execute any of the PowerShell scripts, it means that the server has insufficient RAM to complete the operation. Verify that the server has at least 10 gigabytes of RAM. If it is possible, increase the RAM to 16 gigabytes and then execute the script again. So this should resolve the issue. Moving on, the next error that you could come across would be system.invalid operation exception. So a standard category field in .termset ID is a empty GUID. So this could be an error along with the invalid operation exception. So this error means that one of the following SharePoint application pool is not running in IIS Manager, or the manage metadata service application is not installed in the server, or the wrong SKU of SharePoint is installed on the server. So verify that all application pools are running in IIS Manager and that the manage metadata service application is installed and running in SharePoint. If you still see this error, then uninstall all versions of SharePoint and restart the server, reinstall SharePoint Server 2013 and execute the PowerShell scripts again. So next would be a domain account password change. So if a password for one or more of the required domain accounts changes, then you must update the credentials for that domain account in the following places, which are like in IIS Manager for any application pool that were configured with the domain account. Then in Windows Services console, filter the list of services according to logon as and change any service that was configured with domain account. If it is necessary, in SharePoint Central Administration, click Security, configure managed accounts, then edit or delete accounts as necessary. That concludes the lesson for this module. Go ahead and try out the practices in this module, and I will see you in the next module review. In this module, we learned how to have the online storefront setup, starting from prerequisite and then moving on to setting up the entire storefront, and also the entire installation steps of PowerShell scripts. After completion of the PowerShell scripts, how do we verify each and every installation whether it is successful or not, and also we ended up with knowing about what are the troubleshooting steps that we need to follow, and also about what are the development environment setups that we need to handle for a custom storefront setup. So I will see you in the next module where we will talk about online storefront setup and publishing.